to Living Well. This is Dr. Heather Dowen. I'm your host today, and we are going to be talking today about digestion and digestive diseases. So it's going to be a lot about poop. And as a functional medicine doctor and a naturopathic medical doctor, I talk to my patients about poop more than most people would ever, or most doctors would ever. And it's interesting for me to see how people have no idea how they really should be digesting. So the Bad Girl's Guide to Living Well is a companion podcast, and it goes along with naturopathicmd.com, where you can get supplementation and testing, etc. But this is an educational piece where you're able to make changes in your life and educate yourself about what you need to do in order to enjoy optimal health. We call it the Bad Girl's Guide to Living Well because nobody's perfect. And the only people that really want to be perfect are sort of mentally ill, because it's impossible. And letting go of that perfection will probably help you poop better, but also just give you better quality of life across the board. Now, the Bad Girl's Guide to Living Well is so that you can have fun in your life and enjoy it, and yet, maybe do things that aren't perfectly fantastic for your health and be able to insulate yourself from the negative effects long term, and age well and age gracefully while still having fun and being able to have a glass of wine or 4 every now and then ish. Now, we're going to talk today about digestion, and I'm a science nerd, and I've taught anatomy and physiology, pathology, and pharmacology, and so that's why I bring evidence-based medicine, functional medicine, and science together, and trying to educate you about why things are done the way that they're done in medicine and how to help your body heal better from a functional perspective. So let's start with how you eat. I like to tell my students that you are a hollow sack of mucus and poop. And that's it's kind of funny, but kind of not. But the reason is we are hollow. From mouth to anus, we're hollow, and it counts as a surface of the body. And it has some tissue, kind of like skin, that protects your outside from your inside. Because if your outside and your inside mix, that's not a good thing. And so we've got a protective layer of skin on our outside, but then on our inside, it's a little bit more complicated. Now let's start in the mouth. You may have heard that you should chew things 20 or 30 times a bite. Most of us eat on the run. So we're eating standing up, and that's a big no-no. We eat alone, and that's a big no-no. And the reason that you may have heard that is because it means that we're not taking our time to digest. Now, Naturopathic MD and functional medicine and this podcast, we concentrate a lot about the 3 pillars of what I have conceived of as the basic reasons why people have chronic disease, anything that's non-communicable. So not colds, not flus, not infections, even though they have a role, obviously. But all disease basically comes down to stress, inflammation, and toxicity. And we're going to relate all of those things to your digestive health today. So stress favors the sympathetic system, which is your adrenal glands and their release of adrenaline and even cortisol as well. And those are some of our big stress hormones. Both of those can shut down your digestive system. And so we need to have a balance between fight or flight, which is your sympathetic system, and rest and digest, which is your parasympathetic system. Your parasympathetic is, when you're resting, when you're sleeping, when you're digesting, and having a balance between those 2 automatic systems is one of the big, big determinants of health. If you're under stress, you can't digest well. So if you're eating on the go, or you're eating fast, and you're not chewing, and you're not giving yourself the time to nourish yourself, then you're shooting yourself in the foot right off because you're not caring for your body. It brings up a really interesting idea where when we're stressed and when we're, just acting on a survival level, we're not being aware of self-care. And most of us just give up our care of ourselves in order to take care of others or work a job and, pay the bills, or even some of us do it to watch TV because we just are so stressed out that we we check out. We need to have that checkout because everything else is so overstimulatory in our lives. And we come from a society that has a lot of stimulation. And that can be very stressful as well. There's a research study that came out recently that said that living in the city has a lot of noise, and that noise stress is impacting people's health more than we ever thought. So first, relax. Look at your feeding yourself as a nurturing event. Think if you have children or grandchildren or little people on the face of the planet that you love or care for or want to be healthy and happy, or you even remember when you were little, what were the things that we did to show people that, we love them? Feeding my kid was one of my favorite things because it was nourishing his little body. It was helping him to grow. And so doing that self-nourishing is deeply, deeply important. So let's get back to chewing. One of my favorite people says, chew long and prosper, which I think is great. And why is that important? Well, let's say that you are eating one of my favorite things, and one of the reasons why I'm a little bit of a bad girl, cheeseburgers. In my heart, I would be a vegan, but God, I love cheeseburgers. And the more bacon and cheese and mushrooms and onions and things, and even gluten buns, God, I just love them. So let's take that and break it down as far as what it's going to do in your digestion and how it rebuilds your body. Because it's important to think. We just, garbage in, garbage out. We don't necessarily think about how we're really nourishing our body, and it's incredibly important. So when you start to chew, you not only break things apart physically so that it opens it up to be able to be absorbed better and digested better, you also start to break down those foods, especially carbohydrates, in the mouth. I did a science experiment when I was in 6th grade, I think, and I remember it clearly because we took saltine crackers and we chewed them for 45 to 60 seconds. And do you know what happened? They tasted eventually like you put a teaspoon of sugar in your mouth. Same thing happens with a whole grain cracker or whole grain rice or those complex carbohydrates that people like to think are better. They're not necessarily, because those things are all just made out of long chains of glucose molecules. So we start to chew and it starts to break down our carbohydrates. And that's what our saliva is doing. Now, when we swallow it and it goes down into our stomach, this is where we start to break down the protein. So if in the cheeseburger example, we start out with the bread. The bread is going to be broken down initially in carbohydrate digestion so that we're able to absorb those carbohydrates, which are then used for fuel for our body. Now, your stomach is one of the big places where we really start heavier processes of a digestion. And so we have mechanical or breaking down when your stomach goes blah, 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 blah. That's a mechanical, smushing around of that food. But also hydrochloric acid is one of the big factors. There's others as well, but we're going to keep this simple. So your hydrochloric acid, or the acid in your stomach, is about a pH of 2. It's about equivalent to battery acid, which will burn you, right? Now, the reason why I say that you're a hollow sack of mucus and poo is because there's a lot of mucus lining your digestive system, and mucus is used for protection, so it's not always bad. But your stomach has a really thick mucus that protects your body from this stomach acid. Now let's start relating some digestive issues as we go along, because it'll make more sense. And now I think is a perfect time to really discuss GERD, or acid reflux, or gastroesophageal reflux disease. And we have a lot of people that are experiencing heartburn and a burn up. Sometimes it even feels like a heart attack for people. They can cough. It's very deeply uncomfortable. And there's over-the-counter medications and prescription medications that a lot of people take in order to manage these symptoms. Do you know what some of these side effects of these medications are? You may have heard: kidney failure, dementia, osteoporosis, and stomach cancer. They also increase the likelihood of getting infections like C. diff and salmonella, because stomach acid is used as a barrier to infection. And it kills a lot of those bacteria that we're exposed to when we eat them, and can protect us from infections like food poisoning and hepatitis A. if it's strong enough. Now, what these drugs do is they raise the pH, which means it makes it less strong. So pH scale from 1 to 4 or 0 to 14, the lower the number, the more acid, the higher the number, the more alkaline. And so if your pH should be 2 and you raise it up to a 4 or a 5, then you're not going to be able to digest as well. We'll get to that in a bit because that's how you digest proteins. So these medications like proton pump inhibitors or H2 blockers, they inhibit your body's ability to make all of that acid. And that is dangerous because it causes those side effects and it can lead to more infections, osteoporosis, dementia, etc. But also, it doesn't stop the acid going up into your esophagus. So you can get esophageal cancer or esophagus cancer from acid reflux. And that's a dangerous thing. And that's why it's important to stop the process. But drugs, we find, aren't the best answer. So if you take one of those acid blockers or H2 pump inhibitors, what's happening is your pH is no longer strong enough to burn as it comes up, but it's still going up. When the stomach is working properly, you have 2 valves on the top and the bottom that close, so then the stomach can mix together whatever is in it with the acid and it starts breaking down proteins. The sphincters are signaled to close when the pH is low enough. So what happens when you eat heavy foods or fatty foods? What's happening to trigger acid reflux is that you don't have enough acid to close the sphincter. So when the stomach starts to churn, the acid just comes up through that valve that has not closed. They used to do testing to see whether the acid in the stomach was actually low or high. And they don't do it anymore. And I think it's really interesting because in all the years that I've been practicing, I've seen someone with actual high stomach acid or a pH that's way too low and that's why it's burning once. So usually what happens is people are stressed or they're eating things that make their pH not get low enough. And in those 2 cases, because stress shuts down your digestive system, so you don't make as much hydrochloric acid. There's other reasons as well. Sometimes a zinc deficiency can add into it. And there's hernias too, which aren't necessarily going to be fixed. Or if your valve has a physical problem, it won't necessarily close. And in those cases, sometimes medications are necessary because there aren't other ways to keep the acid from going up, damaging the tissues and causing cancer, like precancerous cells. So when you are supporting the stomach, you can often add more acid in, close those sphincters, and the acid reflux is gone. And I've done it time and time again for patients and family and friends, and it works. So this is what I would like to challenge you to do. If you have acid reflux, apple cider vinegar is one of the best things that you can use. Bragg's has a great organic form. You can see, like, I have an extra large bottle of it. And what that acid does, what vinegar is an acid. So if you take it, it'll drop the pH of your stomach and your sphincters will close and the acid reflux is gone. Often. Now, you may curse my name for the 10 to 15 seconds it takes for that acid or that vinegar to get down and hit your stomach and close the sphincters. But time and time again, I've seen it just resolve. You probably want to keep some sort of a rescue med, like milk, if you can tolerate it, or Tums. I've only really seen someone need that in almost 15 years of practice once. So there are other ways. You can order hydrochloric acid capsules, which will work if you don't like the taste of the vinegar. And I should say, I'll drink the vinegar right out of the bottle, but I'm a little bit weird. So you probably want to work up and dilute it. About 1 to 2 teaspoons to a tablespoon in a shot glass with the rest filled with water is a good place to start. You can start it off first thing in the morning, and that can reset your digestion, during the day to help stimulate the process, because the acid in your stomach and your stomach working well really signals for everything else in the digestion to work well. So why is this acid so important? Well, some of you who are adventurous may have tried ceviche before, or it's lemon juice on or lime juice on fish or shrimp. And what happens is the acid cooks the protein, and it changes from looking like a raw shrimp to a cooked shrimp because it denatures the protein. And what it does is it changes the chemical structure of the proteins, which are usually all wound up tight, and opens them up so that they can be exposed to digestive enzymes further on down the road. So that's more or less the role of the stomach. So as the food comes out of the stomach, so we've worked on the hamburger there, right, in the stomach. We've worked on the cheese because there's protein in that as well. And there's protein in other aspects of the plant-based things like the lettuce and the tomato. There are some proteins there, but largely they're full of fiber, etc. And fiber is really important as we move on down the road. But let's talk about the small intestine, because small intestine is a really fantastic surface of absorption where you're going to break down those pieces into smaller molecules so that you can build yourself out of what you've eaten. So the fats and the proteins in your food are used for your structure and the minerals, etc., and function, whereas the carbohydrates are largely used for fuel. I shouldn't get ahead of myself too much. I want to show you this supplement here is deglycerated licorice, and it's also a really good thing to help with acid reflux. This is a chewable. There are other sorts. This one is a capsule or DGL+, and those things, if you're not into this vinegar or if the vinegar hasn't worked, it can be good to help decrease. It lines the stomach. It's more of it's kind of instead of being like the acid, it helps support more the mucus to protect the lining. And that's really important because that's why ulcers happen, because the mucus gets burned through and the acid starts to eat a hole. Because the mucus is produced when you're in a relaxed parasympathetic state. So after the food comes out of the stomach, we've got digestive enzymes that come out of the pancreas, as well as bile that comes out of the liver. And they all meet together and they mix. There's also bicarbonate that neutralizes the acid so it doesn't burn all the way down your small intestine. And what those digestive enzymes do is they break up those long chains of proteins into amino acids. Amino acids are the building blocks of protein in your body. DNA codes for proteins. That's what it does. So proteins are what you're built out of, and it's what tells your body how to function for the most part. And that's what DNA does if you're looking at it from a functional perspective. And so all the epigenetics you can talk about, really, it's just building proteins, whether they're structure or enzymes. Now, the enzymes in your pancreas break down proteins in the cheese and the meat, especially, into amino acids that then can be absorbed by the small intestine. Now, what does bile do? Where the gallbladder holds bile and secretes it out into the small intestine when the food gets released into there, ideally. Now, let's talk about when people have their gallbladders taken out. This is one of the most asinine surgeries I can even think of, because most people are never educated about how they will never digest fat appropriately again. Now, if you know that essential fatty acids or fish oils or olive oil or anything like that is important to take, then you're not being able to absorb it should bother you if you don't have a gallbladder. And a lot of times the pain that was thought to be a gallbladder just comes back after the surgery. Now, what about gallstones or, gallbladder sludge, etc.? Those are not good things to have, but usually if you have one attack, then you can make changes dietarily, supplementally, and avoid having others in the future. I mean, you absolutely don't want to have a gallstone stuck in a duct because that can be awful, painful, and even life-threatening. And so that's not a good plan. But there are things that you can do to avoid that happening once you know it's an issue. And so being proactive about your liver health, your hydration, what you're eating, your food choices can be really, really important to avoid having gallbladder problems in the future once you know you have them. But anybody that has a liver should protect it, because if you're drinking any kind of alcohol, if you're eating anything packaged, if you're living on the face of the planet where you're exposed to pesticides or plastics or any sort of toxicity, which, as you know, it's stress, toxicity, and inflammation, then you need to support your liver. I have a couple favorite formulas for that. Liver cleanse is something that taking at night can help really balance your body and prevent a lot of negative things down the road from happening. And it's a lot of liquefying bile, making sure that the liver is working well, and helping with the digestion, because bile helps digest fats. It's like soap. It emulsifies and breaks up the particles of fat so that the lipases, which are the digestive part from the pancreas, can get in there and break it down into little fatty acids that then make up your brain and your cell membranes, and your inflammatory processes can be balanced by healthy fats as well. Fat is a storage, obviously, but there's good fats as well. So we've got the digestive enzymes breaking down the protein, the lipases and the bile helping with digestion of healthy fats, especially in the cheese. Depends on if you put on like mayonnaise on your burger, etc. And so all of those things break down large molecules into smaller ones that then can be digested and absorbed into your bloodstream so that they can go around your body and repair and help with functioning of your body's optimal health. Now, your small intestine is really, really long tube covered with little fingers of things called villi that, if you spread it all out, would be the size of several football fields. It's a huge absorptive surface for you to take all of the stuff that you put and feed your face with and absorb it so that you can make you out of it. If you are what you eat, don't be fake, fast, cheap, or easy, right? I love that. So chew long and prosper, and don't be fake, fast, cheap, or easy. And this is why. So this digestive surface in your small intestine, this is where we see leaky gut. You may have heard of leaky gut. And what that is when you have a lot of inflammation or stress on the tissues. They are usually very, very tight junctions between cells, because remember, it's a surface of the body. So as a surface of the body, you don't want bacteria or large protein molecules getting into your bloodstream, because then your immune system is going to attack it because it looks like an invader, like an invading virus or bacteria. And so those tight junctions, when they function perfectly, don't let any undigested food or bacteria, etc., into your blood. Now, a leaky gut is when those junctions become loose and larger proteins, because your pancreas isn't working well, or your liver isn't working well, or you don't have enough stomach acid, you're not able to break down those food particles as well as you should. And they're allowed into the bloodstream, where your immune system attacks it and causes inflammation. So that's leaky gut. One of my favorite, in essence, right? So one of my favorite things for leaky gut is something called glutamine. We kind of skipped digestive enzymes. So we talked about HCl. Digestive enzymes in convention, you may have heard the ads on the radio for EPI. Do you have EPI? Go on our website and take this test. You might have EPI. Ask your doctor if you have EPI and whether, there's a drug, I can't remember the name of it, is right for you. EPI is exocrine pancreas insufficiency, which means you're not making enough digestive enzymes. So you could go to the store and you could buy digestive enzymes and you could take them before meals and it would help your digestion work better. Or you could go to your doctor, get a prescription, And if you have any sort of bowel issues like weakness in your bowel lining, it could explode your digestive system. Not a good plan. You might as well just go and get the ones that have been safe and used for years and years and years and haven't been altered with a patent and work better and don't have side effects. Digestive enzymes actually, when you take them away from food, can help lower inflammation and help with arthritis and pain, fibromyalgia, even cancer. There was a doctor in New York City that used digestive enzymes or proteolytic enzymes to treat cancer. And so they're a really, really amazing thing that you can implement. And it's easy to do, and it's just supporting your body's ability to digest. And if you're spending the kind of money that I'm spending on food to make sure that it's organic and it's grass-fed and it's free range and it's, massaged on Thursdays, it's the highest quality food that we can get, then you don't want to lose it because your digestion isn't working well enough and you're just losing all of those healthy nutrients. So now your food then moves into the large intestine. And the large intestine is where most of the bacteria, if not all of your healthy bacteria and your microbiome are located. And we've talked a lot about microbiome previously, and the microbiome is the bacteria and all of the little microscopic organisms that live in your body. And we want to have a healthy and balanced microbiome. The HLC Symbiotic Intensive by Pharmax is my favorite probiotic. It's actually in a sachet form. It does need to be refrigerated. You can see it's kind of large, but you put it in a little bit of water. It tastes kind of like yogurt. You want to do it before you go to bed on an empty stomach, ideally. And that is they have 150 billion viable cells. And they've done the research showing that they're the most healthy human commensals, which means probiotic strains that are research driven and clinically proven to be the most beneficial for the human body. Now, I actually have a genetic weakness that I discovered when I did my nutrition genome. The nutrition genome can be found, if you want to do that test, at naturopathicmd.com. You can check your genome and see how you can eat and how you can supplement to optimize your health. It's one of my absolute 100% favorite tests. Now, this is a bifidobacteria professional probiotic with 50 billion viable bacteria in there. And I take this one because I am more likely to have low levels of bifidobacterium. And if you look at the nutrition genome, you can see the sorts of effects that they will have on your body. One of them for me is I'm more likely to be anxious. That's a shock. When I did that test, I was like, oh, yes, I can see why I'm anxious here and here and here and here. Oh, and then this other thing, thank you to my ancestors, right? Makes me good in wartime, but, living in suburbia, maybe not so much. So let's talk, before we get into the large intestine, let's talk about what we were saying with the inflammation from the small intestine, because that is the root of food sensitivities. And food sensitivities are one of the most problematic pieces of human health that's largely ignored by convention. The only real food sensitivities that convention will look at, they won't even look at sensitivities. They just go full-blown allergy. So if your throat closes and you have the likelihood of dying if you eat fish or have eggs, or have those anaphylactic allergies, or if you've got full-blown celiac disease from an allergy to gluten, that's all that they recognize. There is a big spectrum between being able to completely tolerate gluten and having celiac disease. So somewhere in the middle there, a lot of people are really sensitive. And that's a story for another time as far as the toxicity and why I believe that has happened when we've been eating, gluten for thousands of years. And so why is everybody suddenly going gluten-free? But that's a talk for another time. Food sensitivities are one of the biggest ways that I help patients gain control of their health in a really meaningful and applicable and experienced way. I may have shared with you before that I cannot eat turkey. If I eat turkey, I feel like I got hit by a bus for the next 3 days. My pain increases, my state of mind is not as good, I'm really fatigued. It is a real buzzkill on Thanksgiving. And so I had 3 bites last Thanksgiving because I was like, well, I don't eat it all year. It can't be that bad. And I was sick for 3 days. And turkey's supposed to be so healthy for you, right? It's lean meat. I was having organic turkey for Thanksgiving, so it was a clean meat. And when I was at the height of my pain scales a couple of years ago, I was having a turkey burger every day because I thought it was healthy and it was good for me and it was delicious and I loved it. And I was roasting whole turkeys and I was in a lot of pain. And so now I avoid it. And that pain that I was in is not an issue anymore as far as those triggers. So the issue was able to be addressed pretty significantly by just deciding not to eat something that was making me worse. The way that I found out about turkey is I did a test called the ALCAT test, ALCAT. You can also find that on naturopathicmd.com. And this test is super cool because what it does is it takes your own blood out, it separates out your white blood cells, grows a whole bunch of them, and then the scientists at Cell Science Laboratories who run or Cell Science Systems who run this test go to the grocery stores and they buy food that people would buy, and then they create antigens from them and they expose your cells to these proteins coming from food, which would be like if you have undigested proteins or completely, they should be broken up into amino acids, which make up proteins. So if you have, shorter little polypeptides that can be exposed to your cells, then you see what sort of an immune reaction happens. And they watch how much your own cells freak out when they're exposed to these things. And they grade them on like a red, orange, yellow, and green. One of the best tests. That's my other favorite test. So the nutrition genome and the ALCAT test were 2 of my absolute favorite all-time tests. And believe me, I've run a lot of testing on myself. And I was able to make changes immediately that made a huge difference in how I felt. Initially, when I did it, I got it back. I was sensitive to coffee, cauliflower, coconut, turkey, a couple of it. I'm like, BS, there's no way I'm sensitive to all those things. I don't have any digestive problems, really. This is crazy. What a stupid test. Well, we paid for it. Why don't you just try it? Because I was really resistant to it, thinking that I couldn't have coffee or chocolate. Chocolate was another one. And so I took them out for 2 weeks, and then I was at Trader Joe's, and they have that whole long line of, that whole aisle that has chocolate lining both sides. And I was working late and I just wanted a little snack. So I got myself some chocolate and I took it to work because I was working late. And I had some, and I almost immediately got a serious headache, like migraine tension headache from the back of my neck up. And I thought, oof, I've been on the computer too long today. I've been working too much. Well, not being so receptive to the idea that I was really sensitive to chocolate, it took me 3 more times to really put 2 and 2, 1 and 2, or 2 and 2 together in order to see that this reaction that I was having with my painful headaches was coming from chocolate. The good news is I helped heal up my gut. I did my probiotics, my digestive enzymes, and I was able to reset my immune system, and I can have chocolate now, for those of you who are feeling really sorry for me. But I don't have it as much. I actually ate carob for a whole year, which wasn't quite so bad. I still eat it because I think it's good. But, chocolate's, I think, a little bit better at times. So you can heal up a lot of these sensitivities. So there is hope. However, turkey, I've tried, and it's just one of those things that I'm not going to be able to tolerate. And that's fine, because I don't get headaches like I did anymore, or leg pain like I was having. So there are things that you can do when you get this information. You can take action, you can make changes, and you can get a lot better. Now, how do you heal up the gut? Glutamine is the number one, it's an amino acid, and glutamine is the number one food source for your small intestinal cells. So leaky gut can be repaired because the body repairs itself if you give it what it needs. So if you give it glutamine, then it can help start making those cells stronger. Glutamine comes in a powder. I put it in my smoothies. You can also put it into water. It doesn't really taste like much. Once you get over about 5 grams, which is quite a bit, it'd be 5 scoops of this in water. You can taste it a little bit, but it's not terrible like some of the things that we do recommend. So glutamine is a great thing that you can start doing. It's actually good for the liver. It's good for the digestive tract. It's great for muscle soreness, like delayed onset muscle soreness. Glutamine can help. It's in a lot of like bodybuilder shakes, etc., and most protein powders and drinks. And it's also one of the only things out there that's specifically good for kidneys. There's not a whole lot that you can do for kidneys once they go bad, and glutamine is one of them. So it's one of my favorite supplements that I recommend a lot. And later we're going to talk about a recipe on how I get my glutamine naturally, because we talk about these supplements a lot as far as, what can you buy to take that's in a capsule or a powder or a liquid that's going to help your body work better. And that's a great thing. But when you get it from food, it's even better. And so we'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. Now let's get back to the large intestine, because this is where poop is really born. The large intestine is where all your microbiome is. Microbiome has an effect on your not only your digestion, but your immune system, how your brain works and feels, and it is associated with a healthy one is associated with less allergies, less autoimmunity, less chronic diseases. And so probiotics are one of the best things that most people can take. And however it is that you get them, fermented foods are a great way to get them naturally. But if you have any sort of a digestive problem or weakness, then supplementation can be really helpful, at least in the beginning, to reverse the problem that you have. Now, the large intestine is where we absorb most of our water, and the bacteria in our large intestine help synthesize some vitamins as well, like vitamin K, which is important for clotting and cartilage and tissue health. There's a lot of really cool research coming out about vitamin K. It's the new vitamin D, so that will be interesting to see how many other things are beneficial about vitamin K. So your large intestine absorbs the water that you've eaten into your system to help with your hydration levels. And then it eliminates the waste. So let's talk about let's just start about the other issues that can go on in the digestion and what to do about them. Since we're talking about the large intestine, constipation is a really, really common problem that can increase the likelihood of autism, ADD, ADHD because of the toxic effect and the inflammatory effect. It also has a role in colon cancer, even high cholesterol, because you're absorbing more bile, which is a cholesterol thing. So it's a really important piece of your digestion. And when you're constipated, you don't feel well. And I've seen a lot of people that don't even know that they should have a bowel movement every time they eat. After you eat, just like a baby, every time you eat, you should have a bowel movement because you're making room for what you put in. But most of us do not do that. And it should be healthy and well-formed. And if you're a poop nerd, you can go and you can look at I think it's the Bristol charts, to see what a poop should really look like. It should look like a long brown banana, more or less. And if you don't, then you could improve your bowel habits. So I've actually had patients bring me in pictures of their newly healthy poops. Please don't Snapchat me or put that on my Facebook page, because I think that should be a private thing between you and your colon. No offense. So, how do you experience? I mean, it's a really good determinant of health to see how well you're digesting. Water is one of the best ways to remedy constipation, period. The more hydrated you are, the less you have to suck the water out of, or the more dehydrated you are, the more water you have to suck out of your digestive system, which makes stools hard and dry and difficult to pass. So drink water. And then the other piece, one of the first things that you can do for constipation is fiber, adequate fiber. Do you know where you get fiber? I mean, we talked about that cheeseburger. Is there a lot of fiber in that cheeseburger? No. And that is why we have a standard American diet that's really sad, because it's desperately low in fiber. A lot of news sources are letting people know now that they should eat a lot of vegetables, which is, I'm glad you're probably all sitting down for that. But the more vegetables that you eat, the healthier you're going to be. As long as they're not, and I don't mean potatoes, and okay, so that doesn't really count, but green leafy vegetables, etc., they have lots of vitamins and they have lots of minerals and they have a lot of fiber. Nuts have a lot of fiber as well. So when you're getting fiber, then you're able to hold more water in the lumen of the intestine, and it eases the evacuation of that waste. The other big thing is exercise. So water, vegetables, and exercise can make seriously beneficial impacts on your health, and not just with your colon. Now, what are some other major things that can go wrong with the digestive system? We talked about celiac disease a little bit. We talked about constipation. We talked about acid reflux and not being able to make enough beneficial digestive enzymes. The other big things that we're seeing more of, or people are talking more about, are like Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis and inflammatory bowel diseases. Now, those are pretty far along the spectrum of what can go wrong with the digestion. So we talked about the basics. Let's go back. Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis are when you start to lose, you get holes in your gut lining and erosions that can be really dangerous. You can also get abscesses. Ulcerative colitis can progress to cancer, liver failure, organ failure. Crohn's disease can cause abscesses, and people have their like intestines taken out because so much damage has happened. So why? One of my colleagues ate McDonald's for his whole childhood and drank soda and had a really unhealthy diet and was stressed. And he had Crohn's disease. He weighed 125 pounds. He's over 6 feet tall, and was told he was going to be on medications for the rest of his life. Well, he stopped eating McDonald's, he took supplements, and he hasn't had an attack in over 10 years. And we see this time and time again. Changing the diet, giving the body what it needs so that it stops attacking itself. Ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease are largely autoimmune diseases. And those are pretty advanced. And if you're struggling with those sorts of problems, then you really should book an appointment with a professional to help, with functional medicine professional to help you get off of the drugs, manage your symptoms, and make healthy choices and decisions about how you can decrease the likelihood of you getting a colostomy bag or having, feet of your intestines taken out because they're so diseased. There is hope. The medications that are given for those digestive disorders, like Crohn's disease, cause cancer. And if you get exposed to a bacteria or a virus, it could kill you. You're not supposed to take it if you have an open wound or a flu or a cold, because your immune system is so suppressed, it can't fight it off. Doesn't sound like a really good plan. Prednisone is a serious anti-inflammatory that's given. It causes diabetes. So before you have to take drastic actions like that, why don't you look a little bit deeper into what can be done to prevent the progression of that disease to being that bad, but also how to get off of those medications, because there are options. Time and time again, we see a reversal of digestive diseases like this. One of my other favorite tests we do food sensitivity, definitely, because it helps decrease the inflammation in the gut. But we also can do a digestive analysis with a microbiome assessment and see how well you're digesting, whether you have parasites, whether you have yeast causing inflammation, whether you have a good balance of bacteria. Are you breaking down your vegetable fibers and your proteins and your fats? Are you absorbing them? And like, what sort of inflammation do we see in the lining of the gut? And then from there, we can make decisions on how to heal it up, how to remove whatever's causing the irritation, and make significant changes. And that's another test you can find on naturopathicmd.com. So we talked about GERD and acid reflux, Crohn's disease, constipation. Now, what about gas and bloating? Because those are really, really common things that people complain of a lot, or nausea, like stomach upset, indigestion, right? All those things that people took heavy metal bismuth, Pepto-Bismol for years. Not that there isn't a time and a place for that, but those are often food sensitivities. If you eat something and you feel a little nauseous, don't eat it. You're probably sensitive to it and it's causing low-grade inflammation. Gas and bloating are either your bacteria in your gut are off, or you're not digesting it well because of your digestive enzymes, or it's inflammatory. And so as you remove those sensitivities from your diet, then you're going to be less gassy, you're going to be less bloated, you're going to digest better. You'll probably even lose weight just because of the inflammatory weight that's held on to people from eating these sorts of things. Now, conventional medicine doesn't look at this sort of, functionality of your digestive system at all. They give acid blockers, which make it so that you don't digest anything ever again. They take out or digest anything well ever again besides carbohydrates, which is not a good plan, right, for diabetes and inflammation, etc. Take out the gallbladder, not going to digest your fats anymore, and give anti-inflammatories and immunosuppressants for these other diseases that cause cancer and don't support the gut at all. And these are things that if your gut's not working well, nothing's working well, because you can't digest and absorb and repair and build and thrive. And this, our Bad Girls Guide to Living Well and Naturopathic MD are all about helping people to really enjoy optimal health and wellness and thrive in a toxic, stressful world that takes a lot of our attention. So let's do a recap. We talked about how the digestive system functions. We talked about different problems that you can experience when it's not functioning well. And self-care is what we started with in the very, very beginning. How do you care for yourself? Well, you give your body what it needs to work the best. We usually talk about, eating good, healthy, whole foods that are free of toxins like fake sugars, preservatives, artificial colors, artificial flavors, MSG, lots of sodium and added sugars, high fructose corn syrup. All of those things you should never eat. If you do eat them, then you can eat other things to protect your system and kind of keep a balance. Now, one of my favorite things to eat lately is, it's kind of like my take on a coleslaw, and I use red cabbage. So red cabbage is my new favorite food, I think. I'm on a kick, and it's all in season. So this is organic red cabbage. And red cabbage, I always get the red because I talk about eating your colors. And eating your colors is important because all of those colors are nutrients your body needs to optimally work best. We talked about fats, and we talked about proteins, and we talked about carbohydrates, and those are your macronutrients. But there's a whole bunch of micronutrients that actually take how your body functions and make it able to work, period. And so like the purples are really good for your blood vessels, and they're antioxidant as well. So I take this beautiful cabbage, which is really high in glutamine. So whenever you take a supplement, I believe that in something called synergy, and it's not like a made up thing, but synergy is when there's different parts of plants, especially in herbs, that have been created to work best together. And that's how they show up in nature. So before we go today, I just want to show you one of my favorite things to eat. And it's this cabbage. So we've got high glutamine cabbage. And if you have live glutamine coming from a plant and you take it with a glutamine powder, it is always going to work better. So what I do is I take this and I add a little bit of garlic powder. Garlic powder, well, because I'm Italian, but garlic is a really amazing herb. It helps with cholesterol. It helps with liver health. Very, very few microbes or bad bugs can live through garlic. And these aren't doses that are going to be medicinal. They're doses that are just going to help the body. They're almost homeopathic or copacetic, just help the body work a little bit better. Plus, they're delicious. With that, I add some oregano. Oregano is antifungal. We didn't really talk a whole lot about yeast, but if you have toenail fungus or jock itch or any sort of candida infections, thrush, dandruff, you probably have yeast in your gut. Garlic can help kill yeast, and so can oregano. And then I add a little anise, because anise is tasty, but it also, you can see anise has a nice taste, but it also helps as a carminative, and it helps with gas. And then a little bit of cardamom. Ooh, that was a lot of cardamom. But that can help with gas and digestion as well. It's called a carminative. So then I take my apple cider vinegar and I pour that on. I do a lot of it, right? Because that's going to help the acid in your stomach. The glutamine is going to help your large intestine. And then a little bit of olive oil for the healthy fats. And then you can really get after tossing that salad, right? Because it is the Bad Girls Guide. Oops, see, this is why I have a cleanup crew in my real kitchen. And then I just love it. It's crunchy, it's delicious, it's fresh, it's raw, and it's medicinal. It's food that's actually medicinal. And so that's one of the recipes I want to share with you. If you'd like, you can check out naturopathicmd.com for that very simple recipe, because some people don't know their way around a kitchen, and that's just fine. That's what education is for. And we'll put the recipe up on our Facebook page as well. So just a last note, you don't necessarily want to take a probiotic with this when you're eating, because the apple cider vinegar can kill off some of those bacteria if they're not protected from the gut. And we don't necessarily want to do that. So this has been Dr. Heather Dowen with the Bad Girls Guide to Living Well. I hope that you know a little bit more about the inside of you. You're going to eat more with more presence, eat slowly, chew, drink your water, exercise, and we'll see you next time.